child may ask, "What is the world's story about?" And a grown man or woman may wonder, "What way will the world go? How does it end? And while we're at it, what's the story about?" I believe that there is one story in the world, and only one, that has frightened and inspired us, so that we live in a pearl-white cereal of continuing thought and wonder. Humans are caught in their lives, in their thoughts, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. I think this is the only story we have, and that it occurs on all levels of feeling and intelligence. Virtue and vice were warp and woof of our first consciousness, and they will be the fabric of our last. And this despite any changes we may impose on field and river and mountain, on economy and manners. There is no other story. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean questions. Was it good, or was it evil? Have I done well, or ill?
Hello and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. My name is Eric Lintola.
And I am Hunter Danson.
And just now you heard the beginning 2 paragraphs of part 4 of East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I'm sure we're going to get more into what you read, Hunter, and many other gems and pieces from this part later. But before we do, I got to know, what's in your glass?
I have some throat coat tea because at this stage of the week, in the evening, if I had alcohol, I think it would not be as good of a podcast. And we're getting over some sicknesses in the Danson household, so throat coat is medicine. How about you, Eric?
Well, per usual, we went in very different directions. Since this is the story that you're bringing to us and have more deep things to say, I made what I'm calling this the Sam Hamilton. It is a combination of I only had bourbon, but I wish it was whiskey with an EY, because that would be an Irish whiskey. But it's a bourbon, and he was an American.
Yeah.
With some grapefruit. Thinking Salinas Valley, thinking California, citrus, and some honey. Because you got to know, among the many things Sam Hamilton did probably off screen, right? He had to have been an apiarist,
beekeeper.
So the honey is actually from A&A Acres.
Okay.
And so friends of ours have their own hives. And it's very nice. Grapefruit. It's freshly squeezed from a grapefruit. Grapefruit is a very it's got a very distinct flavor, but it's also pretty watery ultimately. And so it actually creates a nice, sweet, sour, depth flavor that's not overwhelming. I thought it was when I started making it, or I thought it was going to be. And I think if I'd done grapefruit juice from a bottle, it would have been a little bit more pungent than it is. But I'm quite enjoying it. And so
Nice.
Again, what I'm affectionately calling the Sam Hamilton.
It's its own kind of medicine.
Well, Hunter, what are you raising and pouring one out for this week?
Well, I'm pouring one out for stomach viruses in this season with young kids. I actually had the stomach virus 2 weeks ago, and then they got it everyone else in my family got it this past week. Not from me somehow, but just it is a particularly brutal one. It just makes you feel like you're dead, like you're just vomiting up your insides. And at least in adults, and then the kids, they were vomiting and then diarrhea too. It's just like, oh, I mean, it's like, on one hand, I'm glad it's not the flu, because, the flu can be serious, but on the other hand, there's a lot more cleaning that you have to do.
Yeah.
Particularly bed sheets and things in the middle of the night.
What are you raising one for?
Anyway.
That is tough. That is tough, Hunter.
I'm raising a glass to a book called Technopoly by Neil Postman, which I read, I guess, a few weeks ago. I finished it, but I've just been thinking about it a lot, and it was written in the 90s, I think in 97 or something, and it articulates this sort of theory about how we almost worship technology, and how we interact with technology. I think it might be its own podcast at this point, but it's just gotten me to think so much about how I interact with technology, and ultimately whether I want the technology to use me or whether I want to use the technology, or whether, I'm letting it use me.
Yeah.
And I think it's very relevant for all of the stuff that all the progress that we quote unquote progress, it's like, what we should ask, what does real progress look like, and I don't think it's necessarily technological progress that we need.
Yeah.
But how about you, Eric?
Yeah. I've thought long and hard over the last day of what I was going to raise one and pour one out for, Hunter, because it's been a while since we've done our last podcast, and there's been some really cool things and tough things going through. But I'm going to be more lean into a part of myself that to some people might sound super superficial, but matters deeply to me. And so my raising and pouring are deeply related. And I'm going to raise a glass to Sean McDermott, who was, up until this past week, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. Sean McDermott took the Buffalo Bills franchise from a perennially losing franchise for the entirety of my Bills fandom history. About 17 years of losing to a perennial playoff team. Most wins since 2020, like just one of the best teams in the league, with one of the greatest characters among the team members, characteristics, and a franchise that as a Bills fan, like, not only like was fun to see the team win, but it was really fun the way they were winning and the type of team we were cheering for. And he was fired last week, which that didn't necessarily surprise me, because he didn't get us to the big game. And I think there are some challenges he had as a head coach in terms of like game time decisions. And I could dive deep into that, but I'm not going to. But my expectation for how that process went was full of a lot of grace and a lot of expectation of like planning. And there was a press conference with the owner and the GM of the Bills. The GM was not fired for whatever reason. That made it very clear that it was not a planned decision. And it was not done with the players in mind. And actually in the interview, in the press conference, the GM, who's now the president of the team, threw players under the bus. Ooh. And threw coaching staff under the bus. And it was just and so I'm pouring one out for the current state of leadership in the Buffalo Bills franchise. I was reading an article yesterday that said, I think it was titled "How to Lose a Fan Base in 24 Hours." which is, maybe a little bit aggressive, but as Bills fans, like there's a lot of uproar right now. First about the game the Bills lost, which was ridiculous. And there was a completed catch that was called an interception that makes no sense. And it lost us the game. But primarily about the way that our head coach was treated. And I will forever be a Sean McDermott fan and really hope he does not end up on an AFC East team. But even if he does, I still might root for that team as it relates to Sean McDermott, because he's just one of the highest moral standard, like Christian, kind, intense, building up of leaders, like character dudes. And so I'm really disappointed and frustrated at the way our leadership of our team handled it. But wish him the best. And I was so grateful. It's been so much fun being a Bills fan. And I expect it to continue to be. I really do, because of the team we have. But it's going to take a lot of work from the leadership to rebuild my trust in our organization, which is a surprise to me. That's not what I would have said last week. So it's my a little bit longer reason for, and other people might hear this and say, oh, it's just football. It's just a sport. And I get that. It is a sport. It's a game. But there's something really cool about being part of a fan base that it's an encapsulating thing that, I've built relationships with people and just had connections with people across the country, like Chicago, LA, because I'm a Bills fan. Like, how cool is that? So that's what I got. Again, other people might laugh and find it silly, but
hey, you gotta have a thing. I think the thing I would relate is actually Halo, oddly enough, because the Halo fan base is quite passionate, and the development company and the Microsoft as well, who owns the IP, have made many questionable decisions over the years with the management of the franchise. It's not a sports team, but kind of similar feelings. Yeah,
it's a fun show. It's a fun game. And
I think we'll do an episode at some point.
A lot of it together. We'll talk about it at some point.
So, East of Eden.
East of Eden. Hey, Hunter, I just looked, and our first podcast on part 1 of East of Eden dropped on May 8th of 2024. We have made it.
Yeah.
I know that I have slowed us down in the process. But wow, this is a very different book than I expected when I picked up the first pages of it, I don't know, 2 years ago. I was expecting Grapes of Wrath. I was expecting Of Mice and Men. My other experience with John Steinbeck was Travels with Charlie, which I was definitely not expecting in this book. In this book, it wasn't any of those things.
Yeah.
It had pieces of all of them. But one of the things that I found so captivating about this book is the depth of character development and relationships that are built throughout it. In many ways, it feels like this isn't the greatest example, but it feels like a TV show where you spend seasons diving into the relationships between characters. I didn't watch it, but like Downton Abbey type vibe, and what I mean by that is in written form, Steinbeck gets to the depth of characters and the ways they interact and like builds whole characters. He doesn't build like half characters. Even the characters that are like ancillary to the story, but the characters that are paramount to it. Like, it's just, as you read it, and as I was reading it, I was like, oh man, that's terrible. But also, yeah, that's exactly what that person would do in that situation. And this other person wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't be worried about that because I feel like I know this person and I don't like that person, but I understand so much of, who they are and why they make their decisions and how that interaction is impacted the way this character then, makes their decisions.
Yeah.
And he does all of this within the frame of a title, in East of Eden, that kind of gives away the ending, or a large part of the ending. If you've read the story of Cain and Abel and the story of Eden from the beginning, and yet isn't superficial or weak because of that. Those are just some of my quick thoughts on this. I wanted to throw them out there to see if any of those connect with kind of why you brought this to us and how it shaped you.
Yeah.
But also as a way to open up the conversation on part 4, and then also on the book as in its entirety.
Yeah. Ooh. Thanks, Eric. There's many different directions we could go, I think.
Let's start with, if you have any response to, within 2 minutes of the book as a whole.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about part 4 and then come back.
Yeah.
To the inspiration and the impact of the book.
I would say East of Eden to me is a bright and shining example of a great novel. And by great, I don't mean that it'll go down in history or, that it's the best book in the world or whatever. I just mean that it's very well written, that Steinbeck set out to tell this story of his family and the story of good and evil in this way. He had this vision and he achieved it and he did it. And and it's funny reading it again because I can look closer and like read slower, and, reading over 2 years, gives some time, at least it's not like I did some heavy study of it, but just subconsciously, thinking about it and letting it marinate. Because the first time I read it, I just kind of blew through it because I couldn't put it down. Just couldn't stop reading it. And this time around I can, and I was also reading Steinbeck's East of Eden letters, the letters that he wrote to his editor every day before he started working on East of Eden in the drafting process, the journal of a novel. And I was sort of tried to read it like chronologically as he was writing each parts. And so I was trying to get into the process because I am also a writer, and it's really just astonishing how well it's written and how he's able to achieve his goals. And I think the simplicity of the language tricks you into not noticing like how many techniques and creative uses of like creative devices that he uses throughout, especially for like characterizations. Like when he's characterizing Joe, who's the Kate's bouncer.
Yeah.
Just the way that Joe thinks. And it's not like Steinbeck will put it in italics and say, Joe thought this.
Yes,
it's that
the
whole style of narration changes. And there's no punctuation to delineate to like a thought or not. It's just sort of like, so now we're in Joe's head, and it's all so elegant and and the whole book is full of that. And Steinbeck's said himself, well, it's just a book. I'm just using my tools, you know, and I think that's kind of the hallmark of an artist who has realized the height of their powers and what they're capable of, is that, you know, they're not, they're just saying, you know, these are my tools and this is the best I can do. And I think personally, East of Eden, I will always remember the ending. And and I think, and we'll get into the ending. I think we'll save that for later in the podcast. But
yeah, spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Obviously,
we're part 4.
I don't know if we need much of a summary at this point, because part 4 is really just, you know, he's tying up all of everything that he has set in motion to this point is coming together now, and you see the you know, the conflict between Cal and Aaron, and all of these things that have been under the surface, and all that tension sort of breaks, and and you see the resolution of that and how that works out for Cal and Kate and Aaron. Lee and Adam. Yeah.
You used a phrase. You talked about it being a great book. And I have a definition of what makes something a great book that I've built over just having lots of book studies, conversations about books. And for me, and I might have said this in a previous episode, a great book is a book that becomes richer through conversation. When you discuss it with somebody else, first of all, you want to discuss it with somebody else. But when you do, your thoughts on the book don't just change, but they like develop, and they get deeper, and the book transforms as you discuss it. Whereas, and sometimes those are also very fun books, but not necessarily. Whereas just a fun book is a book that you can discuss for a little bit, and it doesn't really, you might change your opinion on it, but it doesn't lead you somewhere deeper.
Yeah.
And so as 2 examples of that, and then we can dive into part 4, I would call Ready Player One a fun book, but it's not a great book. It's a book that, you know, big cultural moment. We have an entire episode on it. You can listen to it if you want to be offended, if you love Ready Player One. But for me, when I talk with people about that book, the conversation kind of ends pretty quickly. You kind of talk about some things, and you're like, oh, it's a lot of cool references. There's some really cool ideas in the book. It's really cool, like to see, and to kind of the search and the MacGuffin, you know, very fun. But it doesn't lead to a better discussion or a deep discussion or a conversation that makes you want to go back to the book and read it more, and you know, spend time in the nooks and crannies and the whereas a book like Man in the High Castle, I would consider a great book, not because I like it necessarily, but because I distinctly remember having a conversation with a group about it, and all of us went into the conversation and be like, yeah, this was a fine book. By the time we'd finished talking 2 hours or more later, we're like, oh my goodness, there is so much that this book did. How did it do all those things? I still don't necessarily like the story it's telling, but wow, like I want to go back and reread it to better understand this. And like, that's what a great book does. For me, that's what leads me to call something a great book. And I think this book, as now justified by 6 hours of content between you and me, can help speak to that.
Yeah.
So, Audrey, you named that this book, part 4, brings together the tension that's just under the surface on so many of these characters, and you see characters interact, or you hear about characters interacting for the first time.
Yeah.
And we're kind of really introduced to Joe in a deep way for the first time in this part. Which of those relationships do you want to dive into first, or is there a particular story arc or a particular scene that we need to talk about just to open this part of the conversation?
Oof, I don't know. I have a couple notes. I was thinking, I have things that I remember from my first read that stuck in my head. And then I have some things that impacted me more the second time around. So I guess I'll start with the first read. And to respond to your question, I'd say that Lee was probably stuck in my head the most. Sam Hamilton and Lee on the first read. Sam Hamilton is not here in part 4, although he is here in spirit.
Yes. Oh, Lee's conversation about Sam Hamilton when Sam Hamilton died is one of the best parts of this part.
Yeah.
But please go for it. Sorry.
It's funny because there was like a particular line that I just thought about and would recur to me a lot over the years after the first time I read East of Eden. And that was a line about Lee's conversational therapy. Let me find the.
Oh, that's Lee is so cool.
I found it. It's page.
What page is it?
Page 587. If you are following along with us, which thank you very much for your long-suffering patience. We're using the Centennial Edition of East of Eden. You can find them used on most online bookstores or thrift books or whatever. Beautiful copy of the book, but and just a note again about the way that Steinbeck writes is what I love is that he uses the medium to the fullest extent, in that he can do really deep characterization and cross spans of time very quickly. And Steinbeck is really good at pacing. So like the end of the story the time clips along pretty quick. Like you go through months in a couple pages and stuff like that. Which I think is really is a limitation of television. It's much harder to do that kind of thing. But in a novel, you can narrate it. And anyway.
And he does it by linking you to what's happening historically, too.
Yes, he does that, yeah.
Often. And so as a reader, you're like, oh, I'm like understanding history. Or if you're familiar with that time of history, like it feels even, it regrounds the story in like a nonfiction, like in a reality, in the reality of this world in a particular time.
And that actually, the second time around, the stuff with Mr. Fenchel, who's the German who lives in Salinas, I found really, that hit me a lot harder this time around.
Okay.
And this is just, I just love Lee. This is what this is about. Lee nodded and was glad. He had gone to San Francisco for the books he needed and had written for a number of separates. He knew about as much as was known about the anatomy of the brain and the symptoms and severities of lesion and thrombus. He had studied and asked questions with the same unwavering intensity as when he had trapped and pelted and cured a Hebrew verb. Dr. H.C. Murphy had got to know Lee very well and had gone from a professional impatience with a Chinese servant to a genuine admiration for a scholar. Dr. Murphy had even borrowed some of Lee's news separates and reports on diagnosis and practice. He told Dr. Edwards that he knows more about the pathology of cerebral hemorrhage than I do, and I bet as much as you do. He spoke with a kind of affectionate anger that this should be so. The medical profession is unconsciously irritated by lay knowledge. When Lee reported Adam's improvement, he said, "It does seem to me that the absorption is continuing." "I had a patient," Dr. Murphy said, and he told a hopeful story. "I'm always afraid of recurrence," said Lee. "That you have to leave with the Almighty," said Dr. Murphy. "We can't patch an artery like an inner tube. By the way, how do you get him to let you take his blood pressure?" "I bet on his, and he bets on mine. It's better than horse racing." "Who wins?" "Well, I could," said Lee, "but I don't. That would spoil the game and the chart." "How do you keep him from getting exciting?" "It's my own invention," said Lee. "I call it conversational therapy." "Must take all your time." "It does," said Lee. And I couldn't exactly tell you why it stuck in my head for so long. I mean, Lee is a very interesting character because Steinbeck is a white man writing about a Chinese American. And yet I think he's writing with a great deal of sympathy, even though he has blind spots. And I think that the language that Steinbeck uses, he includes racial slurs when people talk about Lee, which is not unrealistic.
Yeah.
And Lee is just so noble and bears it so well. And one could say he is maybe idealized to a certain extent. But, I think we talked last time in the Part 3 podcast about how sometimes it's a good thing to have characters who are noble, who can sort of be a pillar for us to aspire to. And I think the thing that became more clear to me this time is that Lee developed such a deep relationship with Adam, and a relationship based on love. And it's not necessarily like Lee definitely does so much more for Adam than Adam deserves. And yet that is that's really the definition of love. And this time around, in this quote in particular, he talks about conversational therapy. And I have observed situations in my life at this point where of elder care, of what happens when people can't take care of themselves as well. And the way that we go about it in America, in general, I don't think is that healthy. And because what people really need is relationship and conversational therapy. And I feel like so often when people need care, the people they need are their family, the people who are close to them, but the family doesn't want to. Or maybe they do and they feel that they can't because, the realities of the financial aspect and all that kind of stuff. It's all very complicated for every situation, and every situation is different. But what Lee does is he cares for Adam and he gives him relationship, and we try to solve things with drugs and medicine and surgery and all these sorts of things, which are not unimportant, but I think that maybe they wouldn't be so needed if we just cared for people in a more natural way, and talked to them, went and saw them, took the time, loneliness is deadly.
Yeah. In so many ways. There's a scene on page 445. Cal and Lee are talking together, and Cal's talking about his dad, and he says, "I love him. Cal said. I love him too, said Lee. I guess couldn't have stayed around so long if I hadn't. He is not smart in a worldly sense, but he's a good man. Maybe the best man I have ever known. Lee's character development in this book is very long. And I think that as a reader, I actually thinking about this, I'm like a little frustrated by that. Like, I feel like he could have been more deeply like brought out. But maybe that's what you're saying, Hunter, is that both Lee and Sam Hamilton, we get the depth of who they are. And even more so for Lee than Sam Hamilton by the end. But they still seem like impossible characters to they seem fake in a sense because of that virtue or nobility. And yet there are people in life that are like them. And it's not because they haven't failed and sinned and messed up and aren't messy themselves. Because Lee owns that and names that and talks about his failures. But they trust in the human being.
There's a lot of.
I'm not quite where I want to be. I didn't quite land it. I'm not there yet, and maybe that'll come to me a little bit later. But
Well, I'm not sure if this is directly related, but I want to point out that we get a lot of the most, I guess, interesting to me, like philosophy and deep thinking and interesting ideas come through Lee's thoughts and ruminations in the book. And I think it makes sense because Lee is a servant, and in societies with servants and like the servants know the people that they're serving better than the masters do, I think. And like, just because you're getting paid to be a servant doesn't mean that dynamic changes. I think that's still possible today. But, you know, Lee, in a way, is like positioned almost perfectly to comment on the American way of life, especially a white, well-to-do American.
yeah.
And there's this one part that is some of Lee's philosophizing that I just really enjoyed. It comes on page 580. There was a quiet rising joy in Lee. It was the joy of change. Time's drawing down for Adam, he thought. Time must be drawing down for me, but I don't feel it. I feel immortal. Once, when I was very young, I felt mortal, but not anymore. Death has receded. He wondered if this were a normal way to feel. And he wondered what Adam meant, saying his father was a thief. Part of the dream, maybe. And then Lee's mind played on the way it often did. Suppose it were true. Adam, the most rigidly honest man it was possible to find, living all his life on stolen money. Lee laughed to himself. Now, this second will, and Aaron, whose purity was a little on the self-indulgent side, living all his life on the profits from a whorehouse. Was this some kind of joke, or did things balance so that if one went too far in one direction, an automatic slide moved on the scale and the balance was reestablished? He thought of Sam Hamilton. He had knocked on so many doors. He had the most schemes and plans, and no one would give him any money. But of course, he had so much. He was so rich. You couldn't give him any more. Riches seem to come to the poor in spirit, the poor in interest and joy. To put it straight, the very rich are a poor bunch of bastards. He wondered if that were true. They acted that way sometimes. He thought of Cal burning the money to punish himself, and the punishment hadn't hurt him as badly as the crime. Lee said to himself, if there should happen to be a place where one day I'll come up with Sam Hamilton, I'll have a lot of good stories to tell him. And his mind went on. But so will he.
Lee is the paternal character in this story, or takes it over from Sam Hamilton. Right, Sam Hamilton works as like a surrogate father in many ways for Adam. Lee is the father of Cal and Aaron, especially for the first portion of their lives, and then even as Adam steps into his role, Lee remains a father figure, and then becomes a caregiver for Adam, and in many ways, I think he's like kind of paternal towards Adam. But this also might be. I'm also thinking about what you were sharing about the remembering in this particular society that he was a servant, like lived with this family 24/7, and at one point leaves to go open his bookstore, which he'd been wanting to do for years and years and years, and then shows back up in the kitchen one day, because for many reasons, but it's right. He needs to be with his family, and there is an interaction there that you see portrayed in movies, and there's a lot of views on and a lot of thoughts on, and I have some of my own. And then we also get to see this really cool moment with Abra, who is Aaron's girlfriend in this story, or at least begins that way. And she's much more interesting than Aaron is. Much more interesting character, I think. And there's a scene where right before the quote you shared, Adam and Lee are talking, and Adam says, "Oh, sure, Abra, she's a nice girl," and Lee responds, he says, "I love her," and not in a weird sense, and then he interacts with Abra just a few pages later. It's on page 582. It's just Lee and Abra in a scene, which that's a scene that, what a cool thing that we were offered that. How did we get offered this scene? How is this a scene that exists? Page 582. So Abra is interacting with Lee for the first time in a while. And Lee's given her a tart and some yummy things. Abra said gaily, but you wish for something now. What is it, Lee? She said to Lee, or he blurted out, "I wish you were my daughter." He was shocked at himself. He went to the stove and turned out the gas under the tea kettle, then lighted it again. She said softly, "I wish you were my father." He glanced quickly at her and away. "You do?" "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I love you." Lee went quickly out of the kitchen. He sat in his room, gripping his hands tightly together until he stopped choking. He got up and took a small carved ebony box from the top of his bureau. A dragon climbed toward heaven on the box. He carried the box to the kitchen and laid it on the table between Abra's hands. "This is for you," he said, and his tone had no inflection. She looks at it, and Lee said, "This was my mother's only ornament." Abra got up, and put her arms around him and kissed him on the cheek. And it was the only time such a thing had ever happened in his whole life. This is primarily a story that follows the Trask family, the biological Trask family. Yeah. And people married into it. And in one sense of that, neither Lee nor Abra should quote unquote count to that family arc. And yet as readers and as we understand the family, they're both absolutely integral members of the family. And by the end of the story, they make up 2/3 of the Trask family. And they are in many ways like carrying the Trask legacy on and keeping Cal to task with his nature. And it's just such a powerful scene, that particular scene. And it is also, and I'm realizing this now, the external processor in me is like this is opening us up to what the next part in this book would be if it continued on through Cal's story.
In the Journal of a Novel, in the letters, he talked about doing a volume 2. As like towards the end of it, he's like, I'm glad that I thought of doing a volume 2 because I've enjoyed being with these characters so much that I don't want to leave them after the book is over. I don't think he ever did a volume 2 though.
I think some of the best stories are told with the idea of a second story in mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes the strength is that the second story is never told.
Yeah. And I think a big theme of East of Eden is what we pass on to generations. And I think that's why this book ages so well, because it's really just a story that keeps on going. It's about, the sins of our fathers and mothers. More about the fathers in this one, but it's Steinbeck.
Did you pay attention to Kate's story?
That's true. That's true. No.
Kate's like, we haven't talked too much about Kate's story in parts 1, 2, 3, and we haven't talked too much about it in part 4. I'm not exactly sure if there are full reasons behind it. For me, I just like, it's like terrifying. It's like a crazy secondary piece, but sorry, you keep going.
What I meant was that most of the point of view characters are men, which...
Yes, that is accurate. Yeah.
Which, it's Steinbeck and it's the 1960s and, I think that as much as it is important to criticize and call out the blind spots of writers or artists or especially political leaders and things, it's also important when you're thinking about art not to totally write off the rest of what is there, because just because Steinbeck had some thought mostly about men because he was a man and what it means to be a good man or not, and it doesn't mean that all of that thought is worthless because he had these other blind spots and mistakes in his thinking. And I think he was aware of that, even if he wasn't particularly consciously aware of his blind spots. He knew that he had foibles. Anyway, besides the point, East of Eden is a book about like generations and what we pass on to the next generation and how the next generation deals with what we pass on. And like what Lee is passing on to Abra and passing on his mother's ornament, which to Lee is, we've heard the story about Lee's mother and what happened to her. And
Talk about a strong woman.
Right. But Lee recognizes that he is not going to live forever, ever, and that he is going to pass something on, and so he's sort of passing it forward to Abra. And I think it's very American, really, to have this kind of mixing of cultures, and because that's America, whether we want to admit it or not. I think there is something particular about this land that so many people have come to and are part of, and we are all brothers and sisters, whether we believe it or not.
I'm realizing I'm just like wishing there were more people in this conversation right now, Hunter. Not because not because more people always make a conversation better, but because there's so many different angles and pieces you can talk about from this book.
Yeah.
That with more people in the conversation, we would just hit more of them and dive like a little bit deeper into different parts of it. Like that's the type of thing what this book can do. Mm-hmm. And if we were to redo these 4 parts, like it would be a different conversation. Yeah.
So I have, I guess, a couple tidbits I could mention, but I think there's one big one that we have to talk about, which is Cal.
Yes, and we got to talk about the last word,
right?
And then we should probably name at least a little bit of Kate's story too. Which, even just her Alice in Wonderland piece. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but should we start with Cal? Because Cal kind of leads us to Kate, or should we start with Kate?
I feel like Cal's is so central, like, because he is kind of the main character.
Yeah.
By the end of part 4.
It's true. The main character of this book changes between the parts, right?
Yeah.
Like who has the primary narrative, and because so many characters die throughout this story, because you're talking about generations and impacts, and you're talking at each point not just about it. It's never just about one person, but it's almost about like who's carrying the family on at the moment.
Yeah.
Or what relationships are key to the story. And like we've moved from Aaron to Cal, and we'd moved from Adam to Aaron in many ways. And but not even just that, right? Because Adam's always central to the story, and Kate's always a major part of the story. But now I'm just talking myself in a circle. So yeah, let's dive into Cal.
Cal. Okay. So I guess on the second read through, I was just very attentive. I cared a lot about Cal in his struggle to be good. Because I think that's like the central struggle for Cal and for me, I guess, is like reading about, like I want to be good. Like help me be good. Like when he's praying, help me be good. Mm-hmm.
Cal so longs to do that, and he's. I think part of Cal's story is he both thinks he's more important and smarter and better than everybody else, and thinks he's nothing like anybody else because he's got these urges to do mean things. And yet he so strongly desires not to. And it's not until the very end of the story that both Lee and Abra are like, yo, You're not the only messed up person in this world. Like, get over yourself. And that's like a big point of learning for him. I really think it is. This is like what Lee says on page 598 to Cal. Maybe you'll come to know that every man in every generation is refired.
Oh, that was one of my super quotes. Sorry.
It's one of the best quotes in the book. It's one of those. I mean, there's so many different moments to talk about, but like, and Abra is her version of that is, your mom was owned a whorehouse. Like, my dad's a liar. Like, don't think more highly of yourself or less highly of yourself.
I don't know if it's that he thinks highly of himself. It's just that he has, from Kathy, I think he has the ability to see through people and to manipulate them. And like which I guess, if you wanted to put that quality in a positive light, it's just the ability to see through the BS, I guess, that people give. Like the scene with Will Hamilton, I thought was really interesting when he goes to get the money, when he goes to talk to Will Hamilton.
This podcast episode is going to make no sense to anybody who has not read He's Defeated.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, but we are jumping around a lot. Yes, agreed. And I know I just kind of threw us to the end of it, and you're bringing us back earlier in the part, which is probably the better place to start when you're talking about a character's arc.
I guess what I mean is that I don't think the central conflict to Cal is that he thinks that he's better or that his struggles are more important, but that he wants the love of his father. Because it's very clear that Adam loves Aaron more. Yeah. And the way that he talks about Aaron.
It's very clear that everybody loves Aaron more. But the relationship that Cal matters most to Cal, you're right, is his father. Sorry, you go for it.
And I mean, that goes back to the story of Cain and Abel and how God favored Abel's offering more than Cain's. And it doesn't actually say why, really. It doesn't say why God favored one or the other. But this idea of like wanting to do well and bring a good offering and really caring, and yet you try so hard to do something and yet it falls on its face. Yeah. And the scene of the Thanksgiving dinner when Aaron presents his gift to his father was like absolutely heartbreaking for me.
Do you want to set up the scene for us, or do you want me to?
I can do it. Unless you want to.
Why don't I set it up, because you're about to read the quote. Mm-hmm. So we're at Thanksgiving dinner. Aaron has just come home from college. He's been at college for his first semester. And Cal, over that same semester, had worked with Will Hamilton to buy peas at a low price from local farmers and then to resell them at a higher price to British buyers. Because of the war, Will Hamilton had set up this whole thing. Hey, this is how you can make money. The entire premise and reason why Cal had done this was to get enough money to pay his father back, or to for the $15,000 that his father had lost when he was trying to invest in shipping lettuce from California to New York City in the middle of the winter, due to a series of unfortunate situations, none of which were Adam's fault. The lettuce had all gone bad by the time it got there, and he'd lost all that money. And Cal, explicitly trying to buy his father's love, and I say explicitly because Lee talks with him about that, and he also talks with Will Hamilton about it. Like they name it, and Cal is incredibly nervous, but he comes to the dinner table and tries to share this gift with his father.
Adam touched the new bills so that their edges came together, folded the tissue over them, and turned the ends up. He looked helplessly at Lee. Cal caught a feeling of calamity, of destruction in the air, and a weight of sickness overwhelmed him. He heard his father say, "You'll have to give it back." Almost as remotely, his own voice said, "Give it back? Give it back to who?" "To the people you got it from. The British Purchasing Agency. They can't take it back. They're paying 12.5 cents for beans all over the country." "Then give it to the farmers you robbed." "Robbed?" Cal cried. "Why, we paid them 2 cents a pound over the market. We didn't rob them." Cal felt suspended in space, and time seemed very slow. His father took a long time to answer. There seemed to be long spaces between his words. "I send boys out," he said. "I sign my name and they go out. And some will die and some will lie helpless without arms and legs. Not one will come back untorn. Son, do you think I could take a profit on that?" "I did it for you," Cal said. "I wanted you to have the money to make up your loss." "I don't want the money, Cal. And the lettuce. I don't think I did that for profit. It was a kind of game to see if I could get the lettuce there, and I lost. I don't want the money." I think it's so heartbreaking because there's like so much miscommunication on so many sides. And before this, Cal seems to be like growing closer to his father. Almost. Like the morning that Adam goes to get Cal out of jail. I think Cal goes out and Cal meets Kate, he like reacts pretty strongly, and he ends up in jail. And then Adam comes to get him out, and they have like a very honest and open conversation. And Adam even tells Cal, "I trust you." And there's a line, I think it's in that scene, where Steinbeck says, "It is true that many men have never looked into their father's eyes." And Cal looked into his father's eyes then. And I think it just speaks to something kind of eternal about the relationships between a father and son, and how it's so easy to get lost, either, through faults of the father or circumstances of life. And I also think it speaks to our desire to be known by God, or this desire to look into your father's eyes as someone who made you, who is responsible for you, and have them be able to tell you, like, "I trust you, you are good," And I think Cal, he sees that his father loves Aaron, and Cal knows that he can't be like Aaron. Whatever Aaron has, this sort of like purity or whatever, he just doesn't have it. And I think that's also the issue, that like when he meets Will Hamilton, they sort of understand each other because Will just couldn't be like his father. He didn't have the magic that Sam Hamilton had,
Yeah.
And what Cal has, he's smart, I guess, in a worldly way, and that's what Will has too. And so they sort of try to reach their family, but that's not what their family wants,
Yeah.
And so it's this like failure to connect, that I think is unfortunately and tragically like often happens in a lot of families.
Yeah. An inability to relate to what the family values most, which is often relationship. And if you don't mind me doing this, I'd want to jump from there to talk a little bit about Kate.
Okay.
There's a lot we could talk about with Kate. Her story is very, for me, the most human and relatable piece of her story is the ending of it. Page 548 and 549. Then she remembered. She was a very small girl with a face as lovely and fresh as her son's face. A very small girl. Most of the time she knew she was smarter and prettier than anyone else. But now and then a lonely fear would fall upon her, so that she seemed surrounded by a tree-tall forest of enemies. Then every thought and word and look was aimed to hurt her, and she had no place to run and no place to hide. And she would cry in panic, because there was no escape and no sanctuary. Then one day she was reading a book. She could read when she was 5 years old. She remembered the book, brown, with a silver title, and the cloth was broken, and the boards thick. It was Alice in Wonderland. Kate moved her hands slowly and lifted her weight a little from her arms, and she could see the drawings. Alice with long straight hair, but it was the bottle which said, "Drink me," that had changed her life. Alice had taught her that. And that drink me part of Alice in Wonderland is when she drinks it in a bottle and becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And Kate talks about her experience with doing that and becoming so small to protect herself from her enemies because she could hide behind a leaf and nobody could find her. The protection mechanism, and that she always knew that if she drank the whole bottle, that she would just simply disappear. So much of this book, Kate comes across and is written as, and it's named and it's purposeful, and it's something she wrestles with as an inhuman character. And she's not, and she is. And this part of it kind of, for me, it gives a glimpse into her backstory that was much more encouraging to me, or maybe not encouraging, but relatable to me than the previous glimpse into her backstory with school and all of the things she would do. But it's also inextricably tied now to her death, and she ends up dying of suicide shortly afterwards. There is something in her that realizes throughout that who she wants to be, or who she maybe should be, is not who she's able to be. which is something that, to a certain extent, is true in all of us.
Yeah.
Reading from a guy named Paul is writing about that. And it says, the very things I want to do, I do not do. But what I don't want to do is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
He says that in the book of Romans.
It's just amazing how all of the characters feel pretty real, like they could have existed. And yet they are also living parables, almost,
Yeah.
which is a phrase from his East of Eden letters. And he says, I have noticed so many of the reviews of my work show a fear and a hatred of ideas and speculations. It seems to be true that people can only take parables fully clothed with flesh. Any attempt to correlate in terms of thought is frightening, and if that is so, East of Eden is going to take a bad beating because it is full of such things.
Can you either read that again or explain that, what he's saying there?
I have noticed so many of the reviews of my work show a fear and a hatred of ideas and speculations. It seems to be true that people can only take parables fully clothed with flesh. Any attempt to correlate in terms of thought is frightening. And if that is so, East of Eden is going to take a bad beating because it is full of such things. So I think
people can only take parables fully clothed and with flesh. Any use of thought to correlate.
any attempt to correlate in terms of thought is frightening.
Okay. What is that saying?
He's addressing, I think, some of the criticisms that he receives, which is that he fills his work with lots of opinions and ideas and speculations, which there's certainly a lot of in East of Eden, which we have through Lee and Sam Hamilton, and even just through the narrator. There's whole chapters where he just talks about something. And those are some of my favorite chapters. And what he's saying is that people criticize that because, you know, it takes them out of the experience or breaks the fourth wall, or, you know, it's they want it to be a pure novel because and I can see criticisms of that. Like, you know, there's lots of sections in Ready Player One where I'm just like, you really think a lot of your opinions, Ernest Cline, and I don't want to hear any more of it. But that's sort of the nature of the medium, I think, is that, like, you're interacting with a person and ideas and thoughts and the stuff of living. And there's going to be things you love and there's going to be things you hate. I would say that Steinbeck is worth listening to. I think definitely more worth listening to than. I don't need to throw shade on anything. Anyway, but I'm sorry.
Shouldn't have named it. It's my fault.
Yeah. So he's addressing that criticism.
Okay.
And I guess I'm sort of taking the idea of parables clothed with flesh, kind of running with it, because his characters are kind of like that. Like Cal and Aaron represent two sides of boyhood, I guess. Two sides of, you know, two sides of personalities and ways of approaching the world. And, you have Charles and Adam in the beginning who are like that. And Kate is sort of a parable of vice and cruelty, and this sort of seeing only the negative in the world and manipulating it for yourself because that's all there is to do. And yet they're also like living people. It's an amazing trick. It's really, he's a good writer.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of the writing process is trying to embody a character as you're writing them, or like you meet the character, experience a character, live as a character as you're writing, or different writers do it different ways. It feels like Steinbeck is able to embody more characters than more disparate characters than it feels like he has any right to be able to.
Yeah.
He must have had some very dark days as he was writing this book.
He did. He's, there's several days where he's just like, I can't do it today. I don't have it. I'm just full of discouragement and evil, and, takes a break and then he comes back to it. And
Hunter, is there anything else we need to talk about before we talk about Tim Schull?
I have a little tidbit that might be kind of a little lighter thing. This was one thing that struck me while I was reading it the second time.
Yeah.
It was Aaron's ideas about college.
Okay.
Aaron lived in a furnished room in Palo Alto, and he walked the mile to and from the campus every day. He was miserable. What he had expected to find at the university had been vague and beautiful. His picture, never really inspected, had been of clean-eyed young men and immaculate girls, all in academic robes and converging on a white temple on the crown of a wooded hill in the evening. Their faces were shining and dedicated, and their voices rose in chorus, and it was never any time but evening. He had no idea where he had got his picture of academic life. Perhaps from the Doré illustrations of Dante's Inferno, with its masked and radiant angels. Leland Stanford University was not like that. A formal square of brown sandstone blocks set down in a hayfield, a church with an Italian mosaic front, classrooms of varnished pine, and the great world of struggle and anger reenacted in the rise and fall of fraternities. And those bright angels were youths in dirty corduroy trousers, some study-rattled and some learning the small vices of their fathers. I guess I could relate to the way that Aaron built this picture, this ideal in his mind of what he thought it would be like, and the way that we dream dreams to ourselves, and how off those dreams can be.
Think about your ideal day or some of your favorite days at Hamilton and tell me, do they relate to what? Are they more like what Cal envisioned college would be, or more like how he experienced it?
No, they weren't like that. I mean, there's definitely a spirit of like learning, there's a spirit of inquiring and thinking, but there's also a lot of other things that don't help sometimes.
Yeah. But when I think back to some of my favorite moments in college, like I'm seeing myself in fall or in early spring playing
Right.
can jam on the quad, hanging out with friends, debating or really discussing. I didn't like debating. Discussing a book in class, hanging out on the third floor of the chapel, chilling out in KJ by the water feature, maybe eating food at the pub for lunch, like. And so I think in many ways that false narrative still exists, and there's something true about it. It's not entirely false. Like you get those moments, but it's also not what most of life is.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of life is not the idyllic moments.
Yeah.
But the idyllic moments are what make life. It's the everyday moments that make life. And in many ways, they're more beautiful because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Life is full because of those.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty shallow if it's just the other. But we shouldn't also hate on the other. We talked at one point about the movie About Time.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite movies, still is. And of all the different days that the father and son could relive in that movie, they relive an idyllic day, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this beautiful sound, song playing, music playing in the background, and they're running down the steps to the beach, and they're running the beach, and they're running out, and they're playing together all day, and it's like, man, I'm excited for those moments, and I have had some of those with my son and then with my daughter, and I'm excited for those to be more.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the days that make us who we are in our fullness are the everyday situations. So that's what I'm thinking about as I think about how does a book shape you, or how does an approach shape you. It's not necessarily related exactly to the scene, even though I also had some false narratives in my mind of what college would look like. And the way I think about it is false to what the full experience was like. Like it works on both sides of it.
Yeah.
But it's the time there that in many ways made me large parts of who I am, or who I was, and or who I am becoming, maybe.
I think it also relates to the medium of a novel. Like in another place in the letters, he says, a lot of these situations are very preposterous, but he asked the question, isn't all great literature preposterous? And I think that's partly I think it is in a certain sense, because he's trying to realize a vision of these people. And you think about these situations in real life, they would be very awkward and embarrassing. Like the scene with Abra and Lee, when Lee gives her his mother's ornament, it's kind of a preposterous scene, and this young girl telling this old Chinese man, I love you. And yet that's also probably one of the most treasured and sweet moments in the book, and probably in Abra's life, in Lee's life. And so many of the moments that I think back to are preposterous like that. And they're special because they are. They're preposterous. Yeah. And they wouldn't really be miracles if they happened all the time, or if they
and they're so often diminished with the word naive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you're just naive then, or you were a kid, and and that diminishes the beauty of them and the truth and the depth of those moments as well.
Mm. And yet we're also very good at deceiving ourselves and trying to create false narratives about the past or the future, and it takes a lot of self-knowledge to...
Dare I say, know thyself?
Know thyself, yes. To...
That's Hamilton's motto.
Yeah. I know.
I know you know. I figured not everybody would know. Yeah. In fact, most people wouldn't know.
Yeah. So,
can we land this plane?
Let's land it. I'm going to go straight in here.
We're going to start at 519?
The second to last page.
Or are you going
to third to last. Fourth to last. 598.
Have you looked at 519, though? This is the other space where it's brought up in part 4.
Okay.
So yes. in part 3, I think it's part 3, we're introduced to a Hebrew word, timshel, which we talked a lot about in part 3, and whether or not that, and Lee, after years of study with a bunch of Chinese grandmasters and rabbis, like, realize that this word means thou mayest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of debate around that theologically and in terms of the actual Hebrew origins, and that we discussed in part 3. And
I linked a article that I found that was like a guy's dissertation, sort of, and he studied the different sources about it. And I think the conclusion is that the meaning is pretty much right. Is thou mayest is basically in line with rabbis and the Hebrew word. The interesting thing is that I think the pronunciation is actually wrong. It's like supposed to be Tim Scholl, I think. I will relink the article in the show notes if you want to read it. But for Steinbeck's purposes, it's totally fair. It works.
Yes, and that's the point. Within this story, that's where it is. And regardless of the other, what I'm trying to add to that is, the debate around the definition of the word, while an important conversation, is not relevant to this story. Once Lee has shared what it means, it's no longer relevant what else it could mean.
Hey, well,
you disagree with this. Interesting. I didn't think you would disagree.
I do kind of disagree.
All right. So for me, when I approach a book, when I approach a movie, a TV show, whatever it might be, what is true in the world that I'm in that has been created by that author, by that director, producer, whoever it might be, is what is true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons why I love watching movies, is because I can be legitimately surprised by things that my wife is like, yeah, obviously that was going to happen. I knew that Monday at 5. And I was like, what? Because I'm not willing, if I enter into a thing, I'm not willing to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to enter in and experience it. It's also why I don't like horror movies. Because I'm going to get more scared than most people are, because I'm not going to take a step back. And so for me, as I read this book, they have decided that the word timshel means thou mayest. Mm-hmm. And so, for all intents and purposes, that is what that word means. And I can debate it in a conversation around the book, but if I'm going to talk about within the book, like that, the depth of the meaning and how that meaning impacts things, like I'm not going to debate what the word actually means. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I guess I I would agree that when you're interpreting a piece of art, you take the text as the text. I guess for me, I care a lot about the application and what the text says after you leave the world. And Steinbeck uses the meaning of the word to talk a lot about good and evil and what does it mean to be a good man and have a choice, you know. And those themes depend on the meaning of the word. And to me, it does matter whether or not that is the actual word. Part of it is because, like, I guess that's just our different approaches to reading. And because Steinbeck is saying so many things about life beyond just what it means for his characters now. And if I'm going to take this story and be shaped by it, I want to make sure that the things that are shaping me are true, you know. That's my critical... I just have a very critical lens, I guess.
Yeah. And I would say we need to start with how that word and definition shape the characters of the story before we allow it, before we dive into the deep conversation of how it then shapes us from there. Now, obviously, a large part of this is not, we are not such systematized individuals that is necessarily possible. But we're starting with the words. We're starting with the story. And the word Timshel means something to Adam and Lee, and something to Cal, Sam Hamilton, and many other people in this story. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's where we need to start. And that's where, from that, we can look at the bigger impact on ourselves. And where I see this first showing up in part 4 is on page 519. Yeah. Adam has taken the role of being, what is the official word for it? Role and responsibility for determining whether young men are eligible for the military and should be signed over into the military or not. And he's pondering this responsibility. They entered the house, Adam and Lee went to the kitchen. In a moment, Adam followed him and sat at the kitchen table. Lee, he said, suppose we send a boy to the army and he is killed. Are we responsible? Go on, said Lee. I would rather have the whole thing at once. Well, suppose there's a slight doubt that the boy should be in the army, and we send him and he gets killed. I see. Is it responsibility or blame that bothers you? I don't want blame. Sometimes responsibility is worse. It doesn't carry any pleasant egotism. I was thinking about that time when Sam Hamilton and you and I had a long discussion about a word, said Adam. What was that word? Now I see. The word was Timshel. Timshel? And you said... I said that word carried a man's greatness if he wanted to take advantage of it. I remember Sam Hamilton felt good about it. It set him free, said Lee. It gave him the right to be a man separate from every other man. That's lonely. All great and precious things are lonely. What is the word again? Timshel. Thou mayest. I think that sets us up for the very end of this story because it's clearly on Adam's mind throughout this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have the echoes of Sam Hamilton influencing Lee and Adam after he's gone. And so we get to the end, and Aaron has died in the army, and it basically destroys Adam, and he's aging, and he can't see. He's got a nurse.
He's had a stroke.
He had a stroke, yep. I believe he has the stroke right after he reads the letter, or shortly after, about Aaron's death. And Cal and Aber come to Lee because I think Cal and Aber realize that they might actually love each other. And maybe have always known that they were a better fit for each other than Aber and Aaron. Or at least Aber has known. Because Aaron sort of drifts, invents this imaginary version of Abra when he's in college and all that. Anyway, Lee wants to take Cal to get Adam's blessing because I think Lee knows that Cal needs to believe that he can be good and do good. And I just love... Sorry.
I was just saying, Cal can't believe it himself, and nobody else telling him will do it. Cal needs to hear the words from his father.
Yeah. And I guess the final indulgent note I want to make about Steinbeck's writing is throughout East of Eden, what I love about Steinbeck is not just the strong opinions, it's not just the careful plotting and character development, it's the poetry of his words and the way that they flow. Like when you read them out loud, they just sound good. And that is really, to me, another hallmark of great writing and writing that I love is that it's not just about the content. It's about the words themselves and the kind of music that they make together. And Steinbeck has it's lovely. It's really it's sort of it's a poetry that you can approach that is sort of dirty, but also just more beautiful because of that. It's just, I love it. Anyway. Lee said, "When Samuel Hamilton died, the world went out like a candle. I relighted it to see his lovely creations, and I saw his children tossed and torn and destroyed as though some vengefulness was at work. I had to find out my stupidities for myself. These were my stupidities. I thought the good are destroyed while the evil survive and prosper. I thought that once an angry and disgusted God poured molten fire from a crucible to destroy or to purify his little handiwork of mud. I thought I had inherited both the scars of the fire and the impurities which made the fire necessary. All inherited, I thought, all inherited. Do you feel that way?" "I think so," said Cal. "I don't know," Abra said. Lee shook his head. "That isn't good enough thinking." "Maybe," and he was silent. Cal felt the heat of the liquor in his stomach. "Maybe what, Lee?" "Maybe you'll come to know that every man in every generation is re-fired. Does a craftsman, even in his old age, lose his hunger to make a perfect cup, thin, strong, translucent?" He held his cup to the light. All impurities burned out and ready for a glorious flux, and for that, more fire. And then either the slag heap or, perhaps, what no one in the world ever quite gives up, perfection. He drained his cup and he said loudly, "Cal, listen to me. Can you think that whatever made us would stop trying?" And then Lee takes Cal and Abra into the room. And Adam, at this point, he's had a stroke. Lee doesn't know what is going on, but he exhorts him to help Cal and to free him. And finally, Adam looked up with sick weariness. His lips parted and failed and tried again. Then his lungs filled. He expelled the air, and his lips combed the rushing sigh. His whispered words seemed to hang in the air. Tim Shell. His eyes closed and he slept.
What does that mean in that moment?
It means that Cal has a choice. The interesting thing is, when I thought about this book years later, I remembered the ending as Adam saying, "Thou mayest," instead of Tim Shell, which I guess is the same thing. But I think it speaks to how the message of the book shaped me, in that when I thought about what Adam was telling Cal, he's saying, "Thou mayest," you can do it. You have a choice. And I think that's a message that, like, every man and woman needs to hear. I think that in American society, men have an easier time of living in passivity and not choosing, especially white men. But I think that it's not just a cultural thing, that this desire to not choose, to just sit back and, you know, have your hobbies and stuff, and just sort of, as long as you're doing well and your family's okay and everybody's healthy and you got enough money and, like, everything's fine, that's not really good enough. And I guess maybe I'm talking more about what the novel means to me now and how it's shaped me than what it means to itself. But I think that's really the choice for Cal now, is that, like, what would be the natural thing for him to do would be to become more like Kate and just sort of look out for number one, and be like Joe too, who has these little stories that he tells to himself to make himself feel better about being a bastard. But Adam is saying, like, you know, don't listen to those stories. You can choose your own way. You can choose to be good and be with Abra and have this family, and, you know.
Thank you.
What does it mean to you, Eric? Tim Shell.
No, I think you really spoke to what the words of the book are saying. He has the opportunity fully for how to live his life. And there's a lot of strength and beauty in that. Especially to a character like Cal, who spent a lot of his life trying to earn things that you can't earn, that need to be freely given. Mm-hmm. Like the love of a person. And and who also sees himself as being driven by his worst desires. He's a character that, right, he doesn't see his thinking and asking for something to change as the change in and of itself, or as the good. And so I think it has the potential to free him up in a similar way to which it freed Sam Hamilton and Lee.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, thank you for reading this book with me and doing 4 pretty long podcasts and listening and means a lot.
I really enjoyed it. I'm glad you brought this to us. And I've been thinking about this throughout this episode. It's not just true to this episode. It's true to all of our episodes. I'm not sure our listeners realize just how much of our recording time is spent in silence. Processing, forming thoughts, looking at pages.
Yeah.
Or just trying to non-verbally decide who's going to talk next.
Yeah. Well,
and that's a large part of our relationship. That's
yeah. I like to leave as much silence in as I can. You know, it's I feel like so many podcasts are quick and digestible, and you know they're good because that's how they are. But I don't know. I like to be more honest, I guess. And we're not trying to be professional.
That's why we have our own cult following.
Yeah. But, you know, we care about more important things than being professional.
It's true. It's true.
Well, I have a quote. I don't know. I like to read long quotes just because I think, like, if I'm going to listen to something, I want to get some goodies about it, you know, that I might not have found otherwise. So this is a draft of the original of like a foreword that Steinbeck was going to do for East of Eden. And we're going to read a section of it. And Steinbeck, the name of Steinbeck's editor is Pat. And Steinbeck does a little, like, has fun with kind of a almost theatrical. He has parts read, so it's going to be editor, writer, and back and forth talking about the book. I'll be the writer, and Eric is going to be the editor, so...
This book is out of balance. The reader expects one thing and you give him something else. You have written 2 books and stuck them together. The reader will not understand.
No, sir, it goes together. I have written about one family and used stories about another family as well as counterpoint, as rest, as contrast in pace and color.
The reader won't understand. What you call counterpoint only slows the book.
It has to be slowed. Else, how would you know when it goes fast?
You have stopped the book and gone into discussions of God knows what.
Yes, I have. I don't know why. I just wanted to. Perhaps I was wrong.
Right in the middle, you throw in a story about your mother and an airplane. Side note, that's one of my favorite stories in this entire book, and it's definitely something I'm going to take away of the whole piece of selling so many war bonds that she gets to do it, and the pilot thinks she's enjoying herself.
I think we recounted it in
planes.
full in part 2 because we loved it so much.
Yeah. Right in the middle, you throw in a story about your mother and an airplane. The reader wants to know where... This is the first time I'm reading this. The reader wants to know where it ties in, and by God, it doesn't tie in at all. That disappoints a reader.
Yes, sir, I guess you're right. Shall I cut out the story of my mother in the airplane?
The sales department responds, "This book's too long. Costs are up. We'll have to charge $5 for it. People won't pay $5. They won't buy it."
My last book was short. You said then that people won't buy a short book.
Proofreader, the chronology is full of holes. The grammar has no relation to English. On page so-and-so, you have a man look in the World Almanac for steamship rates. They aren't there. I checked. You've got Chinese New Year wrong. The characters aren't consistent. You describe Lisa Hamilton one way and then have her act in a different way. Editor, you make Kathy too black. The readers won't believe her. You make Sam Hamilton too white. The readers won't believe him. No Irishman ever talks like that.
My grandfather did.
Who'll believe it? Second editor, no children ever talked like that.
And then the writer, losing temper as a refuge from despair. God damn it, this is my book. I'll make the children talk any way I want. My book is about good and evil. Maybe the theme got into the execution. Do you want to publish it or not?
Let's see if we can't fix it up. It won't be much work. You want it to be good, don't you? For instance, the ending. The reader won't understand it.
Do you?
Yes, but the reader won't. Proofreader, my God, how you do dangle a participle. Turn to page so-and-so.
There you are, Pat. You came in with a box of glory, and there you stand with an armful of damp garbage. And from this meeting, a new character has emerged. He is called the Reader. The Reader. He is so stupid you can't trust him with an idea. He is so clever he will catch you in the least error. He will not buy short books. He will not buy long books. He is part moron, part genius, and part ogre. There is some doubt as to whether he can read. Well, by God, Pat, he's just like me. No stranger at all. He'll take from my book what he can bring to it. The dull-witted will get dullness, and the brilliant may find things in my book I didn't know were there. And just as he is like me, I hope my book is enough like him so that he may find in it interest and recognition and some beauty as one finds in a friend. Cervantes ends his prologue with a lovely line. I want to use it, Pat, and then I will have done. He says to the reader, may God give you health, and may he be not unmindful of me as well. John Steinbeck. New York, 1952.